Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, or maybe good evening, my friends. We are here for group 2 from a class A1. We are today we are going to presenting about the chunking materials, and then the group is consist as Diandra Aristia and Aldrin Jalani and also Gaitsa Mother Fabian as a moderator. So let's begin the materials, guys. Now the first materials is local translating will be given by Diandra. Diandra, time is yours.
Well, now I will explain about the local translating. The terms of local and global come from the Sternberg's work on processing behavior and intelligence. He claimed that more intelligent persons tend to spend more time in global or a higher order, order planning, a higher order processing, which takes the wider context into account. It's mean that individuals with higher intelligence tend to spend more time on global, and this implies that more intelligent individuals have an inclination towards processing information in a holistic manner, taking into an account the broader context and considering a higher level abstractions and plans. And now I will explain about chunking. The term chunking has been taken from a computing and basically means to change the size of a unit. A unit can be made larger or chunking up, which means that as more comes into a view, we move from the specific to the general or from the part of the wall. Moving in the other direction, we chunk down from the general to the specific or from the wall to the parts. It means that in this context, is a cognitive strategy that involves adjusting the level of detail or abstraction in the information being processed. It allows individuals to manage and comprehend information more effectively by either zooming in on specific details or chunking down, and or zooming out to see the bigger picture or chunking up. This concept is applicable not only in learning and cognition, but also in problem solving and decision making progress. I think it's enough for me. I'll give it back to the moderator.
All right, thank you very much, Diandra, for explaining your materials. And then next is about chunking up. That will be presented by Gaitsa. Gaitsa, please, time is yours.
Okay, thank you for the moderator. So the next material is about chunking up. As Diandra said, so chunking up is the specific and move toward what is more general. As in example, let us think of an armchair. To step up to the next level, that is, to a more general level, one would ask, what this is an example of? So the example question is, what is an armchair an example of in this context? Or alternatively, first is, what is an armchair part of in this context? Or what is an armchair a type of in this context? So a logical answer could be chair. To move up the next, more general level, the same question is asked, what is a chair an example or part of or a type of? So in lexical semantics, a class is a group of related words or phrases that are related to each other. For example, a seat is a seat, an armchair is a chair, and a stool is a stool. The more specific the class, the more meaningless it becomes. Next slide. The next is chunking down. So this is the reverse operation from the general to specific. The question to ask is, what is a specific example of this group? So in this instance, we move from the broad category of furniture to specific items like chairs and armchairs. This reverse operation breaks down a general text into concrete example, aiding in understanding and translation, including subcategories or hyponyms, clarifies exclusion like a cultural group typical breakfast. A translator's virtual text reveal gaps, guiding the decision on whether lateral chunking is required. Okay. The last is lateral chunking. So this is stepping sideways or laterally in much the same way as Edward de Bono's lateral thinking. This procedure is particularly useful for mediating between cultures and provides the type of mental gymnastics or mind shifting required to change the cultural frame. In chunking sideways, the translator, interpreter, or cultural mediator is looking for alternatives that can more readily access search culture frames. The question to ask here is, what is another example of this class of things in this context, or what is at the same level as armchair? So chunking sideways is a method used by translators, interpreters, and cultural mediators to change cultural frames. It involves stepping sideways or laterally, looking for alternatives that can access search culture frames more easily. According to Bell, provides a procedural model of the process which can be done up, down, or laterally. He distinguishes between two types of isa, meanings isa sik meaning, which refers to the class of things a term is a member of, and is or in the sense of has or includes as an example. The second case is has as part and applies to, distinguishes a term from other things in that class. This skill is activated inside a professional translator's head and is an essential part of the global translation process. So trainees should practice chunking as a mental exercise, which can become internalized and become the unconscious strategy performed by professional translators, interpreters, and other mediators. Maybe that's it enough from me. I'll give it back to the moderator.
Next material is about the global translations and mediations between cultures that will be presented by Fahmi.
Okay, thank you, Arbian. So I will explain about global translation and mediation between cultures. There is several main point of global translation and mediation. So the first one is text function. So when someone or people is talk, reading, or listening, they will just the genre like where is the conversation going, or what is this about, like this, like there. So the more we understand the type of text, the more we will understand, and when translating it will be easier. And Bell points out that by assessing the genre or text type, sense can be made of the new text. Carl James asserts that recognition of genre and its rules is the translator's most important task. Understanding the text type is the principal key to successful translation. It helps identify shared text typologies, appeals, and aims in the receiving culture. This approach helps in understanding and mentally visualizing the new text. And the next is chunking from text to cultures. Virtual translation is a metaphor for translators of the target, allowing them to test alternatives against their feelings. Through chunking, they can decide between a source culture-oriented, avoiding polarized extremes. You can see the example in chapter report. So Newmark on 1988 mentions that the translator wishing to produce a semantic translation may translate less important words by culturally neutral third or functional terms, but not by cultural. So in this situation, the translator will use the chunk up for the specific source culture to a more general, and then chunking down text helps focus on register and features like what guys said. But while lateral chunking encourage trainers to consider other texts under the same text type, it helps and understand the boundaries between the text type and recognize the text are functional, not bound by respective norms. I think enough for me. I'll give back to the moderator. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Fahmi, for explaining your materials. And then the next material will be given by Carissa. Carissa, it's yours.
Thanks for the moderator. Next material is Culture Born Like This. Christopher Taylor notes that the contraposition of Maxwell's first name and Howe's surname create a comic effect. Maxwell is a normal first name, yet the collection with House at the time exists a totally different frame, that of quality, intent of price, dry coffee. So, a translator wishing to retain the comic effect will need to isolate the contributing factor by chunking. Please next slide. Okay, next we find by chunking up that Maxwell House is a member of the class of personal name, name plus surname, and then brand of coffee, Maxwell House Instant Coffee. If we chunk down, we notice that the personal name Maxwell House is composite of Kenneth. Maxwell Destination Class UK and US Comedy US and Maxwell Plus House is a coffee brand name with, at the time, a comic effect. The translator with the semantic curve can begin to work on the target culture. She or he will have a feel for what is needed from the free of frame making up the visual text and will then open up, for example, Italian frames by an upward procedural question. Next slide, please. Okay, next is culture-born behavior. The following example is from the phrase Lau Nagub Mahfuz Zukak Almida, together with its published English and German translation. The extract describes how Abbas Hilu asked for Hamida and out the mediation of Kamil. For example, this is Abbas Hilu, born and bred in our alley, and a son of yours and mine. He won Hamidas and in married. Her mother smiled and sighed. Welcome to him indeed. The sweet boy My daughter shall be his, and it will be as though she had never left me. Uncle Camille, when I'm talking about Abbas and his fine colleague, about Hamida and her fine, they read the opening verse of the Quran, as was the custom at all engagement parties. Then references were passed around so so that the engagement is concluded as follows. They read the opening verse of the Quran, as was the custom at all engagement parties. Then refreshments were passed around, while the German translation refers to reading the Fatiha, the first verses from the Quran, as in customary for engagement, and earlier to having something to drink. In both cases we have an instance of explicitation of a cultural intake, namely that reading Fatiha is a custom at engagement in Egypt and other Arab cultures. As for the celebrated reading, the English translation Chang Up and Reader, the culture-specific and occasion-specific references. Similarly, the German translator Chang Up to the more general drink something, which pragmatically means the people had beverage. Maybe enough for me. I'm back to the moderator.
Right, thank you very much, Carissa, for presenting your materials. And then the next materials will be given by myself. So please open about the chunking and cultural values. Okay, thank you very much. Now, as you guys know from our previous explanations about the chunking materials, uh, now I would like to give you guys some things like such as examples of maybe yeah a bit of examples about what is it about that says about new marks in 1993 in page 1969 about the categorical assumption that the translations of the sun tanning episode in Jesolo was sexist. That will be seen in chapter 7.4. Please next slide. Now, here is about the exemplar. This may have more to do with his misinterpretations of local traditions and that than any floating of universally accepted values. But if we apply a logical level analysis, that it will become clearer to the that monocultural readers of this text says Newmart, of course included, that will logically interpret and evaluate according to their own hidden out of awareness but value systems in figure 8.7. Now maybe you cannot very clearly see it, but actually it's showing about the in the figure 8.7 it's showing about the context of the situations is tourist reading a holiday pamphlet advertising a summer resort. Now what is it about? It is about the cultural frames, about the British perceptions of the Italians frames. Now why is Italian? Because in Newmark says that in British perceptions about the Italian frames is evaluations, interpretations, and perceptions is really important. And then in the Italians' value, male gazing to the woman as an object of exploitations. That's what the British perceptions thinking about the Italians' frames. But in fact, Italians is gender inclusive that giving the aesthetics and relaxations about there. What's that? Frames. What is it? Frames. What is the frames about? It is about the advertisings of the summer resorts back again. Then glossary brochure will tell well-rounded beauty. Well-rounded beauty is only a sentence. In Italy, it says about Jesolo. Jesolo. What is it about? It's talking about woman sunbathing, visiting husband, looking at suntan. But in England, it called Guildford. Then you can identify and also taking it as a value about the strategies of the what's that behavior from Newmarkian translator level, and also the environment to understand about the cultural frames that will be really different cultures having the different perceptions. And then please next slide. Now for another example, I have cultural values about and how to mediate them. We return to the American writer is Tom Wolfe in 1999. 1990, and his chronicling of life in New York, but not usually. There are many references to the price of things that will be shown in the original. Now the text says that Sherman McCoy is having. Wait, I got a delay. Okay, now Sherman McCoy is having once. It says that once you had lived in a luxury apartment on the Park Avenue, it was impossible to live in a merely desirable apartment. Naturally, there was no way to explain this to a living soul. Unless you were a complete fool, you couldn't even make the words come out of your mouth. But nevertheless, it was an impossibility. Sherman McCoy, sat with his new and Lingwood designer shoes pulled up against the cold white bowl of the toilet and in the newspaper that rustling in his trembling hands, envisioning Campbell, her eyes brimming with tears, and then leaving the marble entry hall on the 10th floor of for the last time, then commencing her descent into the lower depth. That is adapted for translations from Wolfe in 1990, page 148 to 149. It shows that the chunking up tells us the general values, that the shoes and the apartment are the member of lateral chunking that takes us to the target culture frame. Then we can chunk down in Italian or maybe French in this case, of course, to specify examples such as critical equivalence, which satisfy these values also. And then translator can now help the target reader to access the same values, success, effort, and also the taste, by substituting it the sum of money with luxury, desirable, or designer, as you can see. Then the strategy also obvious that the need to account of inflations is showing the inflations that happen in the New York City. So that's the example. Please next slide. Now, as you can see in figure 8.9, the chunking up tells us the general values that the shoes and the apartment are a member of the lateral chunkings, and so on and so on. In figure 8.9, you can see the chunking to mediate values. Now we have the cultural frames here. In the US, success, sacrifice, effort, and taste is transition level. To the Italy or maybe French is success, sacrifice, effort, and taste. That will be given an evaluation, interpretations, and also the perceptions from the US and Italy or French. In explicit from the US, denotational language, such as talking about cost of shoes, apartment, and etc. But in Italian or French, the implicit is connotational language, talking about designer and luxury. Now, what's the designer? Designer is practically showing about the shoes, and also the luxury is showing about the apartment itself. Now, in the cultural frames, maybe you can in the US you maybe recognize about the New York City, but in Italy or French, they do not recognize New York so intense, but they have Milan or maybe a Paris, as you understand. Now, that's why it shows that identity of the US and also the values from the translation level, and also the strategies, behavior, and environment is showing that being non-ethnic or maybe in Baker is indeed the strategy of limited interventions may simply create an eccentric, eccentricizing or exotizing that showing sophisticated or something like that. I think that's all from the materials or maybe the what's that the example. Please next slide. Now, about the Sherman McCoy here, we have the text that's showing once you had lived in a luxury apartment on Park Avenue, it was impossible to live in a merely desirable apartment. Naturally, there was no way to explain this to a living soul unless you were in a complete tool. You couldn't even make the words come out of your mouth. Nevertheless, it was so it was an impossibility that he, Sharon McCoy, sat with his new ending with designer shoes pulled up against the cold white bowl of the toilet, and then the newspaper, studying the tremble hands, advising Campbell, her eyes brimming with tears, leaving the marbled entry hall on the third for the last time, commencing her descent into the lower depth. Now that's also one of example that I have been giving you about uh, to be chunking up the general of the values itself. But as you can see, in the is that in the technical level, it can be translated into another what's that terms such as the currency itself or whatsoever. But in the frames, we understand that in other control contracts, in other cultural contexts, this is not so, but which takes us to the out of the awareness about the culture that Hall is cited in his Stride of Culture. French is philosopher Pascal Wagner, for example, has written an entire book on the French. All right, thank you very much. Now we are going to be uh, explain about the money. Has written an entire book on the French aversion to speaking on plainly about the money, but particularly by those who have it. Raymond Carroll, in a former professor of French, explains that her compares that the face of American could easily be replaced by, by a dollar sign. But a dollar sign is a sign of incurable materialism, of arrogance, power, and then vulgar pleasures. And then essentially that translator will need to be aware of the source cultural frame within, but which he or she can interpret money. With being done, the translator will look for a sign or critical equivalent in the target culture which fits the overall virtual text and which means related to this particular value of frame. So I think that's all. Next slide, please. The logical levels of a translator or interpreter's task. Here is the conclusions we have can taken is first about the level of a translator's or interpreter's task. We can begin to clarify the task of the translator or maybe interpreter as an agent mediating between two cultural worlds. In line with the functionalist theories of translating is about what is it or what is it going on here. This question was famously asked by Goffman in 1974 in Mothine, and with the full of understanding that the questions itself is reductive, and it's like everything else depends on the context and on point of view. As a mediator, it is the translator's job to encompass the most likely interpretations, both from the source text reader's view and that of the virtual target text reader, with due attention to any other actor involved, such as the commissioner. Then the questions can be as can be asked at every level of the logical level model. One can chunk up from the environment or down from identity and world to get more informations, and all of which will then be fed into the virtual text. Next, editor or interpreter should also be able to note where or at which level there is more going on or where there is more at stake. Chunking laterally, for example, to please the client, respect the original author or the reader. At the deepest level is the role and missions in society, where there should be logical or maybe coherent and ethically acceptable is going on that work for the identity level, that of a translator or maybe interpreter as the mediator itself. Chunking down to the level of values and beliefs will bring into the play that mediators own ethics. Next slide, please. Then I think that's all for the conclusions. And so we will end these presentations about the materials of chunking. Please forgive us for all of the mistakes we have been made and also for the bad signals and etc. And I think that's all. Thank you very much for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.